Daesh shows Boko Haram's leader the door. Does the replacement signify a shift in coordination between the groups? Also on today's program, interfaith unity across France after the killing of a priest. Is it time to unify the country's secularism with religion? And in picture this, Summer Olympic athletes spring into action. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. It's been a year of losses for Boko Haram, and the group is apparently ready for change. Last week, they appointed a new leader, Abu Musab al-Barnawi. The announcement came in Daesh's weekly magazine. That's a first, raising questions of a shifting relationship between the two groups. The Nigerian militant group's former figurehead, Abu Bakr Shekau, however, is not going quietly into the night. He's since allegedly rejected his replacement in an audio recording, criticizing al-Barnawi's ideology and reasserting his authority. It's exposed divisions within the group, leading some to speculate that this could be the beginning of the end for the world's deadliest group. Today's newsmaker is Boko Haram, as we ask how its new leadership will impact its reign of violence in the region.
Seven years since Boko Haram began its insurgency in Nigeria, it's still considered the deadliest armed group in the world. Like Daesh, Boko Haram's quest is to build what it calls a caliphate, but its tactics are far more brutal. Boko Haram killed more than 20,000 people, displaced more than 2 million Nigerians, and attained global infamy after the abduction of 200 schoolgirls. But now the group may be in crisis. Boko Haram is losing territory, and its leader, Abu Bakr Shekau, was deposed after an announcement by Daesh. Shekau, though, is holding on to power, plunging the group into a new battle for leadership. Boko Haram's former leader, Abu Bakr Shekau, has been the group's figurehead since its origins as an al-Qaeda offshoot in 2009. Last year, he switched the group's allegiance to Daesh, but Shekau has not been seen on camera in over a year. Recent audio messages confirm he's alive, but his health is in doubt. Even less is known about Boko Haram's newly appointed leader, Abu Musab al-Barnawi. He's appeared on video before as the group's spokesman. He's also reported to be the son of Boko Haram's original founder. Analysts now point to an emerging split in the group, mainly over leadership style. Former leader Shekau is considered indiscriminate and has been known to wage violence against Muslims and mosques. Al-Barnawi is thought to favor more targeted attacks against the Nigerian military and churches. Nigeria's army says it's been making strong gains against Boko Haram in the north. And the government has been downplaying Boko Haram's leadership change, calling it cheap propaganda and wishful thinking by Daesh. Nigerian officials hope that the fight over leadership could weaken Boko Haram further and lead to its collapse. Other analysts warn that power wrangling could make the group erratic and far more dangerous. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Abuja is defense and security expert Max Gabite, and from Cape Town is Ryan Cummings. He's director of the African-focused risk management company Signal Risk. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Max Gabite, let me start with you. Why do you think Daesh or ISIS replaced Shekau?
Well, the formation and the architecture of Boko Haram that operates in cells is the downfall of the same group. In the past, they were known to operate in cells of 10, 5. So there is the possibility that Abu Barnawi is unable to reach Shekau in person and had complained to the ISIS board, and they decided to elevate him as the new leader of ISIL in Nigeria. But before then, don't forget that Boko Haram was really part of the Islamic Maghreb in the African region. And after the kidnapping of Chibok girls, Al-Qaeda, as an affiliate, denounced them And they now got into joining ISIL when they started taking territories. They have since suffered tremendous loss. They have been devastated. Their finances have been cut off. Their chains of supply have been cut off. So it calls for a change in leadership. But I still think that Boko Haram are known to be the architects of the war. They, at first, fought an asymmetric war before coming into conventional war that has defeated them woefully. So the emergence of Abu Banawi is not surprising to us, and it's not surprising to Nigerian military.
Ryan, is this the price you pay for allegiance to Daesh? If you say, hey, I'm pledging allegiance to the caliphate, then they'll fire you when they're unhappy. This is the price you have to pay.
Well, potentially. I think the first point I want to raise is that I'm still quite skeptical that Boko Haram was ever an al-Qaeda affiliate. They most certainly never ever pledged bayat or pledge of allegiance to the group itself. There are suggestions that Boko Haram had very loose operational, potentially logistical ties to al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, but this has never been confirmed. I think speaking to the leadership schism in the movement, I think we mustn't lose sight that this isn't the first time that Abu Bakr Shekau's leadership of Boko Haram has challenged or has been challenged. We saw in 2012, for example, there was a group calling itself Ansaru, who also had split from the movement and specifically cited that Abu Bakr Shekau's discriminate killings of Muslims was the reason why Ansaru had chosen a different path to the group. So while we can perhaps frame this as being symptomatic of the group's pledge of allegiance to the Islamic State and the Islamic State potentially pulling the strings of Boko Haram, from the Levant, I think we should also be cautious that there is a precedent of factionalism within the Boko Haram movement that has directly been linked to disenchantment and unhappiness with Shekau's extremely violent and brutal leadership.
Yeah, Max, you said that this possibly could be, one of the theories is that this possibly could be a deliberate ploy to create two wings of Boko Haram. But how does that sort of square up to the evidence that Shekau says Barnawi is a kafir or an unbeliever, that he follows false creeds? He's clearly not happy that this has taken place. So how does that square with that?
Well, the issue here, I tend to agree with some of the comments from Ryan regarding the Ansaru group and now Banawi. When they were once as Boko Haram, they all agreed on the philosophy of decapitating anyone who doesn't follow their own Salafist ideology of Islam. So it's neither here nor there that Shekau alone was indiscriminately killing Muslims. They were all in this together. What I think may have happened is an issue of funds. When funds thin down, then leadership begins to quarrel over who gets what share. In Banawi's statement, he acclaimed that Shekau lives in luxury with his personal family, and therefore he decided to move away with 8 members of the kitchen cabinet. Again, that is theory. We don't know practically what is going on. But for the fact that the group had never operated as a full unit, except when critical mass arises, it is difficult now to know who the new management team for either Shekau or Abu Banawi is. And that is where I think the Nigerian military, who have already captured a good number of them, ought to begin to do a good enhanced interview to know who is who and who is left behind with Shekau.
Max, do you believe that do you believe that President Buhari is winning in this war against Boko Haram? He's promised to destroy them.
Well, he made it the cardinal point of his election, and being a former military man, he commands respect in the region. The respect that was not given to Goodluck Jonathan by the president of Niger, Chad, and Cameroon is now being given to President Muhammadu Buhari. And you have to also understand that the political aspect of this war has been cemented with France Hollande visiting Nigeria, and again the British Accord So there is a full jointness in the multinational joint task force that involves Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Cameroon. And for the first time in many years, the president of Cameroon came to Nigeria. So I can say that Buhari's order to the military is winning.
Right.
And Boko Haram, at this particular point in time, does not hold any territory in Nigeria.
Yeah, it's
what
lost
they have decided to go back to is one of asymmetry.
Right.
And they will also be defeated in that.
Okay, let me bring in Ryan. Ryan, UN security experts have been quoted as saying that they've seen movement around the borders of Nigeria, Chad, and Niger of fighters. That says what to you, Ryan?
Well, I think it confirms early speculation that Boko Haram is no longer can be framed as a Nigeria-centric Islamist insurgency. I think what we've seen is that it's expanded outside of northeastern Nigeria. It's expanded around the Lake Chad Basin, specifically in areas such as Chad, Cameroon, and Niger, and that any associated counterinsurgency operations being launched against the sect needs to focus on a wider region as opposed to just northeastern Nigeria. So I think that is quite telling, is that we are dealing with an issue that's no longer framed as being specific to that of Nigeria, but one that has definitely regional proportions and should require a regional solution.
Yeah, Ryan, looking at the split, some are saying this is the beginning of the end, but then looking historically at a group like Al-Qaeda, a split within Al-Qaeda created ISIS, chillingly also involving two guys called Abu Musab and Abu Bakr. Which one of the two sounds more reasonable to you? They become more dangerous or they get defeated?
Well, again, very difficult to say because we just don't have credible information on the leadership structure of Boko Haram. We don't necessarily know how many militants the group has. There's, very broad-based estimations that it ranges between 4,000 to 6,000. If this is the case, we need to kind of realize or understand how many of these fighters are aligned to Shekau, how many of these fighters are aligned to Abu al-Barnawi. I think what is key at this stage is that we need to acknowledge that Shekau has held leadership position in Boko Haram for about 7 years now, and he's wielded significant influence at this time, so he should have a significant following. Based on the Al-Naba interview, it seems again that with Abu Musab al-Barnawi, who, as previously mentioned, is a son of Boko Haram's founder Muhammad Yusuf, not only has the backing of the Islamic State, but also because of his lineage, could also wield some significant support in the organization. The big concern should be at this stage is that any rivalry or any competition between two opposing factions within the region is going to play out through violence, with either groups using and resorting to violence and possibly spectacular attacks against both government and civilian interests as a show of strength.
Unfortunately, I've got to wrap. Max and Ryan, you both have been a wealth of information. Thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, France's balancing act as more attacks target the country. Could its concept of secularism be backfiring? And in Picture This, 4 years in the making, Summer Olympic athletes shine in Rio. A Catholic priest was killed in France during morning mass just weeks ago by teenagers who pledged allegiance to Daesh, shaking a nation already reeling from previous attacks this year. A show of unity spread across the country, with religious ceremonies and interfaith events taking center stage. They were sights rarely seen out in the open in a country that holds secularism sacred. It's led to a re-emergence of the debate around the nation's distinct version of secularism, as Natalie Perhernan explains.
Religion and politics united in secular France.
Ce qui est visé, c'est notre démocratie. Elle est la cible. Elle sera notre bouclier. C'est notre unité qui fait notre force.
The murder of a Catholic priest brought a new level of disarray, but it also renewed calls for religious solidarity that both Muslims and Christians have answered.
Nous ne laisserons personne nous diviser. Voilà, c'est tellement riche d'avoir des différences et de pouvoir être ensemble.
Comment auriez pu effleurer votre esprit l'idée que nous puissions détester les gens qui ont facilité les dernières démarches pour que nous puissions prier Allah dans cette ville?
A show of religious unity in a country where secularism is one of the pillars of the state. Secularism is a fundamental principle of the French Republic. At the turn of the 20th century, the Catholic Church wielded significant power and influence, but a clear barrier was put up in 1905 with a law separating the Church and the state. It means religion can't intervene in government affairs, that the state is neutral to all faiths, and that religious beliefs should be kept in the private sphere. But in today's multicultural France, preventing public displays of religious expression is seen by some as religious persecution, especially within the Muslim community. In 2004, a law banned the hijab and other religious clothing and symbols from public schools. And in 2010, another law banned full face coverings like the niqab. But with these values being increasingly used and abused by all sides of the political spectrum, including Marine Le Pen's far-right party, the National Front, critics say they are fracturing communities. France has been Daesh's #1 target in Europe. More than 200 people have died from terrorism there in the past 18 months. In 2014, Daesh called on its followers to specifically target France, one of their so-called grey zones, where Muslims and non-Muslims live side by side. The attacks from the Bataclan to Nice have not only generated fear, but also questions on values and identity. Some blame secularism for community divisions, but for the government, sticking to French values is the only response.
Nous ne pouvons pas sortir de l'état de droit pour protéger l'état de droit. Si nous sortons de l'état de droit des principes constitutionnels, des principes républicains cryptés, alors nous aurons consacré la victoire des terroristes.
But is holding onto a strict interpretation of secularism the right answer to keep unity in France? Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Paris is French human rights and civil liberties activist Yasser Louati. Yasser, good to talk to you again. Yasser, if Daesh or ISIS is targeting French secularism, isn't it probably something worth preserving if Daesh hates it?
Sir, first, Daesh is targeting France as a whole because France has taken sides in the ongoing war in Syria. Don't forget what the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Laurent Fabius, said in 2012. Al-Nusra is doing a hell of a job. That's saying we are supporting this group and providing them with the necessary weapons and training. Don't also forget the secret war going on in the Sahel region between Algeria and the Mali area and the support for dictatorships over there. So when Daesh speaks about secularism, the problem in France is not secularism in of itself. It's the new interpretation of the law on laïcité, secularism. It was fine until the 80s, from 1905 to the 80s, until Muslims became visible and asking us also to have the state respect their religious practices. And this new laïcité was theorized in an infamous report by politician Mr. François Barouin called For a New Laïcité, and this new laïcité, quote, according to him, could not obey human rights. At some point, you have to make a choice between human rights and the secular law.
Okay, but just a point of rebuttal there. Daesh finds reasons to hit Bangladesh and Indonesia and Denmark and all sorts of countries with absolutely no dog in the fight in Syria or Iraq, no history of colonialism and oppression in the Arab and Muslim world. However, let's just clarify what you said. You're not against secularism, but you're against secularism as it is expressed in the way the modern state of France applies it in the year 2016. Is that clear?
First, to get back on what you said, Daesh is targeting everybody for different reasons. Right now, our focus is on France, and I'm giving you the reasons when it comes to France.
Exactly, but that's not the only reason. They'll find a reason, yes. But you're not against secularism, you're against secularism as it's expressed by the French state.
The original laïcité granted religious freedom for the majority religion of the Catholic Church and for minority religions, Jews, for example. But now it is reinterpreted to become a laïcité of a struggle against the visibility of Muslims. That's the problematic laïcité we are dealing with right now, because that is the laïcité, that the new laïcité that has allowed for the exclusion of Muslims from schools, from work, and giving grounds to constantly dominate and exclude Muslims. And we see that, there are double standards. When you see a staunch use of laïcité to crack down on the visibility of Muslims, but nobody speaks on the violation of laïcité when the French government interferes in the internal religious affairs of Muslims by appointing the representatives of this community or telling them what should be said and done.
Do you believe that that drives people into the hands of Daesh and Al-Qaeda?
There is no explanation whatsoever or justification to choose the camp of Daesh. Nevertheless, I can quote to you, for example, Mr. Will McKent from the Brookings Institute and Mr. Olivier Roy, famous researcher on these topics, and they both say that the new interpretation of laïcité has alienated the Muslim community and gives argument to these radical groups when they want to hire. Just try to be in the shoes of a kid who grew up being told, you are not part of France, seeing his mother, his sister, his friend, etc., being excluded from French society, and then you have these lunatics like Daesh telling him, come to us, you will fight for your dignity and your honor. It does, and actually we can speak about a miracle that we don't see hundreds of French Muslims or thousands, rushing to Daesh, but only a handful. Unfortunately, the handful of people choosing the Daesh camp are sufficient to cause massive problems in this country.
You say it's a miracle, right? But I mean, whether Will McCann or whoever said it, isn't it almost more deeply racist to believe that as Muslims, if we're treated generally badly in society, we can't get a job, then we're just one step away from joining Daesh because that's the natural progression? Isn't that a bit of a racism of low expectations of us that we're on the verge of it?
No. No, sir, that is not what I said. First, if you look at the portraits of the various culprits being caught and the ones right now in detention, they don't have any knowledge of the religion of Islam. And to quote the MI5 in the UK and domestic intelligence in France, they are religious ignorance and even a bunch of idiots when it comes to that matter. They don't know nothing about their religion, and the one being used supposedly to fuel their hatred of French society. There is no explanation or connection being made between Islam and adhering to the Daesh rhetoric. As a matter of fact, Daesh has killed much more Muslims than any other Christians or Jews, for example.
Yeah, but what you're saying is that it's a miracle, what you said, again, is that it's a miracle that there aren't hundreds or thousands of Muslims joining Daesh. That paints a pretty bleak picture.
No, I'm talking about citizens, sir.
But is it that bad? Is it that bad in France that so many Muslims might be, I'm not saying justified, but you're saying the context is created for hundreds, if not thousands, and it's a miracle that they're not joining Daesh?
I'm not talking about Muslims as practitioners of this religion. I'm talking about people who refer to Islam as their ideology. Well, if the more knowledgeable you are about Islam, the less likely you are to be seduced or tempted by these radical ideas. I'm only saying that now Daesh has focused on France for specific reasons, and the reason why Daesh finds it so easy to hire within the French ranks, it's because France does not have a strategy to counter the discourse of Daesh. Every single time we hear about a strategy to target Daesh, it is only some communication campaign. That's it.
Yasser Louati, thanks for joining us from Paris. In today's Picture This, the Olympics have kicked off with a hop, skip and a jump in Rio in an event where refugees are taking on world champions and coming out on top. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker was Boko Haram, as we asked how the Nigerian militant group's new leader will impact its reign of violence in the region. Last week, Daesh announced the appointment of Abu Mus'ab al-Barnawi in its weekly magazine, the first time they have publicly intervened in Boko Haram's leadership. Our guest, Max Gabite, says it could be a ploy to create internal divisions, allowing multiple strategic wings in the group. But with Boko Haram on the back foot and its former leader rejecting the change, some are speculating that this could instead be the beginning of the end for the world's deadliest group. You've been watching this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. As always, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.